It's 10 minutes before they open the doors. Everyone's running around before they let everyone into the ballroom, and you haven't taken a single room shot. Do not freak out, I got your back. In this episode, I will show you how to take exceptional room shots, how to choose your vantage point, your exposure, and what to do if people are walking around in your shots. I will even show you live during an actual wedding. But first, let me show you a few shots that I've taken recently. There you go, just a few shots that will hopefully make you watch the next few minutes. These shots are very important to the bride, the venue, and just about everyone that helped put the event together. So the pressure's on you to deliver strong portraits once they come asking for it. So here are a few of the things you need. You'll need one of these right here, a strong, sturdy tripod. I've shot them before without it, but 100% is better with a tripod. You're also going to need a wide-angle lens. In my case, I'm using the 16-35 version 3 Canon lens, but any wide-angle lens will work. And you're also going to need a camera that you can operate in manual settings. I'm using the Canon 1DX Mark II, but any professional camera would work as well. Sometimes you'll need an inexpensive cable release or a more expensive intervalometer, but I never use any of these products, and I'll show you how I do it later in this video. The first step before you even set foot on the ballroom is to understand long exposure photography and the relationship between aperture, exposure, and ISO. A long exposure capture means that the image sensor in your camera is exposed to the light for as long as you have the shutter open. I'm going to show you a 2-second exposure capture so you can understand how the shutter is open for 2 seconds, letting light into the sensor for those 2 full seconds. Ready? There you have it. The shutter speed and aperture in this case are inversely proportional, meaning that the longer that you have the shutter open, the smaller the hole through which light has to come in, aka your aperture. And your ISO is your camera's sensitivity to light. The higher the ISO, the less light you'll need in your picture. More on that later. So by now, hopefully you have an understanding of the 3 elements that make up a photo: your ISO, your exposure, and your shutter speed. Your next step is to find your vantage point and your composition. Avoid really bright areas in your composition. They will be blown out over long exposure shots, unless it's spotlights, which look really good in long exposure shots. You'll see what I mean later. If the house lights are on and the picture is coming out too bright, you can always ask the hotel manager or the ballroom manager to bring down the house lights so you can appreciate the lighting that's done just for the wedding and not let the house light wash out everything else. So here we are live at an event. I only have a few minutes to do this, but I wanted to show you the process anyway. I've chosen this spot because there's a light up there that's going to give me a great start over a long exposure shot. I've set my camera's ISO to 100, the aperture to 22, and we'll see what the shutter speed is going to come out to be, but it's going to be a long exposure. White balance is set to tungsten or 3200 because all these lights here have that temperature. So let's shoot around and see what we get. So now that my settings have been set correctly, I can move around the entire ballroom with the same settings and just get different angles. Let's do that and see what we get. Here's a step-by-step guide on how to take these shots. Select your vantage point. Choose your lowest ISO possible, typically 100 or 50. Choose the highest aperture possible, typically 22 or 32 in some cases. Then look at your in-camera meter and slow down your shutter speed until it's somewhat in the center. Avoid metering over any bright areas or any dark areas. Hopefully the value for the shutter speed will end up being anywhere between 15 and 30 seconds. If it's less than 15, you're probably in a very bright area. And if it's more than 30 seconds that it needs, you're in a dark ballroom and you're going to need one of the previously mentioned cable release or an intervalometer to be longer than 30 seconds. Now, white balance is key. Change your white balance to match the lighting in the room. That's beyond the scope of this video, so I will make a future video about white balance. take a test shot and adjust slower or faster if your picture is too dark or too bright accordingly. I know based on my experience, you're going to have a very limited amount of time to take these shots. So be quick on your feet and move around and get different angles and different vantage points so you can have a variety of different shots. Let me show you a few more live ballrooms versus finish shots. Here are some quick tips for you. If you do not have a sturdy tripod, a cable release, or an intervalometer, set your camera for a 2-second timer and allow it to stop shaking after you press the shutter. Most cameras have a maximum of 30 seconds on your shutter speed. If you need more than that, then you're definitely going to need an intervalometer, but you're going to have to set your camera on bulb, and then you can have the shutter open for as long as your heart desires. If there are people walking around in your shots, any exposure over 20 seconds will make them disappear and will not show up in the final picture. I know this is hard to understand, but once you do it once, you'll see what I mean. However, if they're standing still and you do not want them in the picture, you're gonna have to ask them to move. If you don't want to mess with merging photos with different exposures later in post-production, you're gonna have to ask the house lights to be brought down so everything has a similar exposure. However, if that's not possible, you're gonna have to take multiple exposures, one for the brights and one for the darks, and combine them later in post-production. So there you have it, long exposure shots exposed. Hopefully by now you understand the relationship a little bit better between ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. And the next time you're in a ballroom, you're gonna rock these shots. But if there's something you did not understand in this video, leave it in the comments and I will get back to you. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, give it a like and share with anyone you think might find it useful. If you're not already a subscriber, consider subscribing and hit that bell so you can be notified when I upload a new video. It's good to see you here, and I'll see you in the next one.